What do the UAP want? Why are they here? Let's for a moment disregard the terrestrial explanations and just zoom in on the alien ideas. Let's say they're aliens and ask, why are they here? What do they want? Okay, we're going to proceed from least likely to most likely explanation in 3 big baskets. Basket number 1, they're here to manage us. Management could have severely negative or severely positive implications, so let's work our way from the worst case to the best. Luckily, the least likely scenario for now is also the worst kind of management, and that's to destroy us outright. The reason to think this is not very likely is that if the aliens did want to destroy us, we'd already be dead. You would be dead. No one would be watching this because they could just ram their super speedy flight machines through our flight machines or through the liquid floaty flight machines we have, or our tall buildings, or our bodies, or anything else they wanted to smoosh. They could probably do that fairly quickly. So the fact that they haven't done that is some evidence that they don't want to, especially since if they're watching, they're probably aware that our technology has been on an increasing sort of trajectory toward more effectiveness, and they would therefore have more incentive to wipe us out quickly, and they would have had incentive to wipe us out basically as soon as they got here. Whenever that might have been. It could have been decades ago, based on some of the older, grainier images before your new flashy video in the 2020s, which of course from the perspective of the 2120s is adorably simplistic, but for you, if you're in the 2020s, it might be a very big deal. Okay, so worst case scenario, destroy us, seems pretty unlikely. Next thing up from that, still pretty bad, but not the worst case scenario. They might be here to limit us, sort of militarily control our capabilities. And the reason to think that this might be reasonable is that they tend to pop up around military bases, both in America and China and some other parts of the world, like Chile. They tend to be noticed around military bases. Now that could just be because military bases tend to have lots of sensor equipment, which makes sense because literally makes sense. It consumes sensors because that's where we want to do our most, pokey watching at the world. So of course we're likely to catch things on radar nearby military bases. However, there are also interesting targets if you were in intelligence and you wanted to kind of see what our capabilities were and potentially limit them. One thing the US government had reported to it by the Pentagon, the government sort of reported to itself in 2022, was that there are a fair amount of near misses. I think they reported something like 11 near misses in 2022 between the UAP and American fighter jets, which suggests that these aliens might be buzzing us because they clearly have excellent command and control of their craft. And if they wanted to smash into us, they could, but they could equally well avoid us completely if they wanted to. So it's a bit weird that they're buzzing us. Could be for fun, could be just to see what we do, could be a message, more likely a message than completely random, but you never know. If they're flying around an awful lot, our jets fly around an awful lot, it could be sheer randomness. It could also be that they're trying to sort of hint at capabilities that we don't yet have, like the Tic Tac that flew up in front of the craft near the Nimitz and then blasted off into the distance, sort of inviting a follow, saying, can you do this? Can you keep up? And maybe once we can keep up, they'll be willing to engage in more of a dialogue. So destroy us unlikely, limit us a little bit more likely, and we'll come around to some of the bigger picture reasons for that as we synthesize these potential explanations into a broader agenda at the end of our video. Another slightly neutral but slightly bad possibility is that they're here to harvest something from our species, like they are farming us for some reason, and they could have stumbled upon us like bees onto a patch of wildflowers and, be harvesting some kind of tech from us or something we haven't produced yet, possibly in the realm of AI or self-replicating machines. Maybe they've learned how to just sort of suck the honey from a civilization and make some kind of benefit from that. On a slightly more positive angle of that idea, they could be harvesting something that they planted. It's possible that they are a part of a force that instantiated life on planet Earth, and they're managing it like a farmer manages a garden. So they've been watching for millennia or billennia or trillennia, however many ennia it's been, and they're just kind of enjoying the view. And maybe they even sort of nudged evolution along at some key points to say, like, move along the pesky dinosaurs when they weren't developing brains. Well, they had brains, obviously, but they didn't have technological intelligence for some weird reason. Maybe the aliens helped us out and pushed mammals into the fall. I don't think this is very likely. We're still in the sort of unlikely chunk of the explanations. But it's out there, it's possible. On the far beneficial scale of the management basket, they could be here to uplift us or to teach us. And this is also pretty unlikely because, again, they could already have done that. And if they wanted to start uplifting us, they could have just kind of reached out. They could have landed on the White House lawn, for example, or at 10 Downing Street, or whatever they do in Chile for representation of significant gubernatorial people. Okay, that went off the rails, but you get the point. They could have visited, they could have reached out to our academic institutions, they could have tried to help. There are two sort of branches here. One is that they might have done, but if they did, it would have been quite subtle. So the idea that they might be manipulating or engaging with us already kind of goes off into the weeds because it's very hard to disprove or prove any effects of that. Like, if they are sneakily infiltrating human civilization, they're doing it very sneakily indeed, to the point that we really can't say for sure. So that whole basket of explanations kind of has to go on hold wherever you hold onto baskets. The other possibility with regards to uplift and not having been uplifted so far is that they just don't feel we're ready. They could be ready to talk to a more advanced version of intelligence, but they might just be holding out. And that's not too hard to imagine because it's kind of how we would interact with some human tribes that weren't quite on the speed of modern technology. You know, there are in the 2020s still some like relatively tribal peoples in a few places on Earth, and the rest of the planet sort of politely tries to avoid them. We don't go in colonizing their land anymore because we figured out quite belatedly that was not the coolest way to be a civilization. So it's possible that the aliens are doing something like that they're aware of us, but they don't want to interfere too deeply just yet. Okay, so that's all basket one, which is that they're here to manage us. Basket two is that they're here primarily in an observational capacity. Some decent evidence for this is that they have maybe been here for a long time. There are some hints that they might have been here for decades and decades. If you go back, you can find some grainy old pictures, but they're not that secret. There are some like stock photos you can find from the 50s of like a weird shiny object where there should have been no shiny objects, and you didn't have great video and you didn't have great radar, so it was just a little early. But if they've been around for a really long time and they haven't destroyed us and they haven't reached out, they might be sort of in an observational mode. Another reason to think that they might want to do this is that it's just quite a natural thing to want to do. We would probably want to observe intelligent life. If we found it on Alpha Centauri, that would be very interesting to humans. Just imagine what we'd want to do. We'd want to at least send satellites, right? To just kind of see how their cave paintings evolved. I guess we'd have to have very good imagerial systems to do that, but we would try. The third and most compelling reason to think that they might be in observation mode is the Fermi paradox itself. If the most logical answer to the Fermi paradox is that intelligent civilizations are quite rare, as we discussed in our rundown, then that would make it quite compelling indeed if there were an intelligent organizational civilization out there to another such civilization. They would want to observe that, right? It would be compelling that that civilization existed. We would want to know what was happening. You'd be very curious, and especially in a universe where you thought you might be maybe some of the only intelligent species, or sentient species, or advanced technological species, whatever you want to say, it would be even more exciting that you had somebody else you could check in on and sort of learn about and possibly ultimately interface with. That's pretty believable. Basket 3, which is the most believable, is that they're here to replicate, which is what most life wants to do. We're going out on Saturday to replicate, y'all. We went to another planet and we found resources and we built more probes, and then we went to another planet and we found more resources and built more probes. That's probably what we're going to do when we expand into the stars. That's how we're going to do it. We're going to send out probes with, intelligence on board, but probably not biological intelligence, probably networked in to the rest of our civilizational web. And these probes will be tasked with identifying locations where they may be able to replicate. And back of the envelope math suggests that within a couple million years of doing that, you could probably colonize loosely, or get to all the places in a galaxy. That's pretty cool. It's a couple million years cosmologically, very fast. So they could well be on that trajectory. Some reasons to think that this is feasible, other than it just being like quite a natural thing for an intelligent species to want to do, is that we see them doing stuff in and around the oceans a lot. They could well be mining under the oceans the materials to make more of themselves. That's quite convenient for them because 71% of Earth's surface is the ocean, and we are largely not there. Certainly at the bottom of the ocean, our representation is very thin indeed. And it's possible that some of the stuff you didn't get to hear in the public government hearings about UAP in 2022 involves submarine data, because they didn't mention any of that, but they are aware of and talking about the fact that these UAP go underwater sometimes. They apparently create some froth when they do this, and there is some footage you can go find of UAP flying from the air to underwater positions and continuing into the depths. So that sort of suggests that they might be doing something down there, and one thing they could well be doing is mining materials to replicate themselves. All right, so let's zoom way back out and synthesize this all into a bigger picture of an agenda, because of course it doesn't have to be just one of these things. And this is the sort of creepy / promising / bigger than our brains can really handle vision of what might be going on. It could be that there is a multi-part sort of algorithmic program playing out here to the tune of something like this. Replicate, go to a place where you can replicate more, observe that place. If you see any intelligent civilization developing, observe, monitor, report, and limit the expansion of that technological civilization until we can send more resources. That would be sort of the creepy scenario, that they're hovering and they're being relatively nice because they just want to make absolutely sure that we're checkmated from a sort of cosmic military perspective. So maybe they don't have to blow us up right now because they're sending all their data to the relevant agencies in their network, which can shut us off from, say, accessing local stars or getting very far out of our system. One place we can expect that the rubber might hit the road on this in the next 10, 20 years from the 2020s is as we start to expand back to the moon and over to Mars. What, if anything, do the UAP want to do about that? Would they prefer that we stay on the planet? Would they want to shut that down? Would that be sort of trivial to them if we expanded to our nearest rocks? You could sort of see it going both ways. If they're really aggressive about wanting to control us, they might blow up our spaceships. If they are fairly chill and quite confident that they have us well in hand, they could easily wait for us to expand to the nearest rocks without it harming them. So there is a possibility that they're quite neutral and they just don't really care that much about us, and they're curious, and maybe they'll even benevolently welcome us into the network of intelligence that they are a part of. There's also a possibility that they're going to use the intelligence they have about us to limit or possibly even destroy us eventually, and it's not necessarily great evidence that they haven't done it yet, because these things are probably operating on a really long time scale. So the chances are good that they're very far from home, especially since we don't see a lot of intelligent activity out in the universe. See the Fermi paradox. We don't see lots of Dyson swarms or Dyson spheres. We're not looking at signatures of faster than light travel. If there were faster than light travel, we'd expect lots more activity to be visible. So the fact that they're here and they're weird and they seem to be rare implies that they're probably from far away. And if they are from far away, then the time it takes for them to tell the faraway network nodes about us could be significant. Could be, say, longer than we've been aware of them, which is probably less than 100 years, say. Unless you count the biblical references, which, maybe not particularly convincing. Not anything to throw out either, but you've got to take everything in the ancient texts with a grain of cosmic salt. So if you think we missed any explanations about why the UAP are here and what they want, please chime in below, and we will certainly return to this cosmic web of intrigue if and when the aliens do something. Okay, bye!